Let's go! Come on.
And tell them, defeat Jericho with a shout. Defeat Jericho with a shout. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Defeat Jericho with a shout. As we look at this passage of scripture, we see that Joshua had been instructed to siege the city of Jericho while they were on their way to the promised land of Canaan. Jericho was one of the oldest cities in the world. Its fortified walls was 25 feet high and 20 feet thick. They had soldiers standing guard on top of the walls who could see miles away. Jericho was a symbol of military power and strength and was considered invincible. It was a city that stood upon its defense through the strength of its walls, not wanting to surrender or make peace. The walls stood so tall and thick, nothing seems to be able to penetrate. This physical attribute of Jericho appears to be a losing battle because this city has always been prepared and ready for war. So the Lord speaks to Joshua and says to him, I have given Jericho into your hand. God had given the Israelites the promised land of Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey. But before you can get to the promise, you've got to defeat Jericho. Your Jericho can be areas in your life that's difficult to penetrate. It could be issues you're dealing with that's not easy to shake off. It could be challenges in your life that's not easy to pass through. It could be those stumbling blocks in your way, not easy to step over. But you've got to defeat Jericho. Those fortified walls of depression, those fortified walls of oppression, those walls of pride and envy, walls of doubt, those walls of debt, those walls of divorce, fortified walls of fornication, walls of adultery, walls of backbiting, walls of gossiping, walls of slothfulness, those fortified walls of jealousy. You've got to defeat your Jericho. What is your Jericho on today that's trying to block you from getting to your promise? Too many Christians are living defeated lives because of the walls of Jericho. But in order to gain victory, the walls of Jericho must come down. Before Jericho can be defeated, there are some things that we must do. We must listen, we must obey, and we must sound the alarm. The Lord gave Joshua clear instructions on how to defeat Jericho. He listened in verses 3 through 5. He said, you shall march around the city once for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow the trumpets, and when they make a long blast, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat. He obeyed in verses 14 and 15. He said they marched around the city once for 6 days. It came to pass on the 7th day, and they marched around the city 7 times. They sound the alarm in verse 20. It happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet. They shouted with a great shout that the wall of Jericho fell down. Then the people went up into the city, and they took the city and defeated Jericho. I don't know what walls of Jericho that you have in your life on today, but if you want to defeat Jericho, you've got to learn to listen to God. You've got to learn to obey God, and you've got to learn to sound the alarm. Make a sound of a war cry. Defeat Jericho with a shout. This shout is not a body inside shout. But this shout says that the walls of Jericho must come down. Whatever wall is blocking you from you moving forward in God, shout because it must come down. Whatever depression spirit is holding you down, shout because it must come down. Whatever financial struggles are holding you back, shout because it must come down. Whatever discouragement is weighing on you, shout because it must come down. Whatever pride that's got you puffed up, shout because it must come down. Whatever seems to block you from moving forward, I encourage you to shout because it must come down. Whatever strongholds that's got you bound, I encourage you to shout because it must come down. God has given Jericho into our hands. We have the power to tear down walls in our lives. We can tear down Jericho with a shout. If it's keeping you from listening to God, tear it down. If it's keeping you from obeying God, tear it down. For the walls of Jericho, they must come down. Defeat Jericho with a shout. Destroy the strong man. Tear down the stronghold. Defeat the rebellion. Take your life back and defeat Jericho with a shout. Shouting is psychological warfare intended to create panic and confusion over the enemy. When you shout, you send a message to the enemy that you still have the victory. When you shout, you send a message to God that victory comes from Him. When you shout, your spirit man testifies that God is still able. Shout, for the Lord has torn down the walls of Jericho. Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. Shout, for the Lord has delivered you. Shout, for the Lord has brought you out. Shout, for the Lord has defeated your enemy. Blow your trumpet and give the Lord a shout of praise. Give Him a shout of faith. Give Him a shout of deliverance. Give Him a shout of salvation. Give Him a shout of joy. This shout says that I'm tired of where I am and something in my life has got to change. This shout says that something in my life has got to break. These fortified walls, 25 feet tall, 20 feet thick, has got to come down. God He wanna take us to another level of praise. But the walls of Jericho Jericho. With the shout. Hallelujah. A lot of you may think that shouting doesn't take all that.
Takes all that.
But when you think about what God has done,
Amen.
and where you're trying to get to, you'll shout. There's nobody else shouting. The children of Israel, they were instructed to walk around the walls of Jericho one time for 6 days. Then on the 7th day, walk around the walls of Jericho 7 times. And when you hear the trumpet sound,